Hey everyone, it's Jana from The Last Stitch. Did you know that it's been over 40 years since I made my first garment? Well, what you might ask? Well, it was a pair of trousers with elastic waist made with an old bed linen. Unfortunately, I do not have these pants left, nor do I have any photos. But yeah, that put me on a path into making my own clothes. And I've been doing that consistently now for over 40 years. So I thought it would be interesting to do a video about some of the revelations I've had over these decades. Now, perhaps not so much technical stuff because that's an entire video all to itself, but a lot of mindset shift that I've had in order to realize what is really the essence of sewing. So in today's video, I will share my top lessons that I've learned for over 40 years of sewing. Now the first one is a lesson that I have to relearn over and over again, and that is to not trust my own judgment and always double check. Well, I mean, I can't tell you how many times I have skipped this important lesson, and the result has often been having to bring out the seam ripper. For instance, I've sewn the wrong sleeve, for instance the left sleeve to the right sleeve, because I didn't check the notches or I didn't mark the notches properly. I have done the mistake of adding one piece with the reverse side facing up and the second piece with the wrong side facing up, because I didn't bother checking which side was the right one and which was the wrong side. And I also, of course, didn't mark it, because who has the time to mark? Well, I do that now, but for the longest time I just kind of assumed that I was doing the right things. And by the way, if you need a reminder to double check things, I've actually designed a poster that you can get for free as a printable if you click on the link that is pinned in the comment section of this video, and also the link is in the description section. Go ahead, I have one myself, just because I still need to remind myself that I should always double check now so I don't have to rip later. Now, another important lesson that I've learned, and that was a common mistake especially in the beginning, was that I cannot assume that the pattern designer can read my mind. And what I mean when I say that? Well, in my head I can see an image on a pattern envelope or in a magazine or in an online store and think that this garment must align with my entire vision, both when it comes to fit and ease and maybe length of the sleeves or whatever. I sort of think that this is sometimes it's like an intuitive thing, but no, that's not how it works. I mean, every designer has their own idea of the level of ease, the length, and of course it all depends on the model. And again, of course, we all have unique bodies and tastes, so we should always measure everything towards something that we do like and that we do feel fits well. That's the only way of ensuring that the pattern will fit our idea of the finished garment. So I always now make it a habit of always measuring everything to make sure that the ease is the kind of ease that I prefer, to make sure that the length hits at the right spot. And it's always good if you have any garments that is similar and that fits you well. Well, you have a lot of clues in your pre-existing wardrobe. And then of course, get familiar with your body type and what kind of fit adjustments you have to do. I mean, most of us will have to do at least a few fitting adjustments to be really happy with the end result. And learning how to fit clothes, that's definitely a skill all in itself. But I do have some book suggestions that you can check out if you are new to this. First of all, shameless self-promotion. Me and Malena Järpe's book Fit for Knits. It's an excellent resource for how to fit clothes. Now, we talk primarily here about clothes made with knit fabrics, but almost all the tutorials in this book are also applicable to any type of garments, even woven fabrics. So it's really well illustrated and a good beginner's guide to making pattern adjustments. And that's not the only book I would recommend. I also recommend checking this book out. It's called The Palmer Pletsch Complete Guide to Fitting. Now this deals primarily with woven, but it's very well illustrated, has lots of different fitting options and lots of befores and afters. So I find this is a really good reference book again if you want to get more familiar with fitting. And the third book on my list of good fitting books is the Fitting Books by Gina Renee Dunham. A really well illustrated step-by-step. She has quite a little bit of a different approach compared to the Palmer Pletsch book. So it's always a good idea to maybe see and figure out which kind of approach and method that will work best for you. But yeah, do familiarize yourself with basic fitting skills, because that will really make you so much more happy about the end result, and just understanding your body and how that translates to the particular pattern that you're choosing. Because again, different pattern companies will have different size charts. They will draft patterns for different body types. They will have different preference when it comes to ease, how the ease and also of course fabric choice affects the end result. So by the way, links to all these books that I showed you is in the description section of this video. Now another thing that I have to remind myself repeatedly is to go slow in order to speed up. And what I mean by that is that at least when I began sewing, there was kind of a marketing messaging around being able to quickly make your garment. I think I've seen less of that now, but back in the days in the 80s and 90s, there were lots of patterns that were labeled like 4-hour patterns or sew in an evening, quick sew, that kind of marketing messaging, which was telling a story that you would be able to whip up a garment in just a few hours. Now, of course, some garments and with some practice, you will be able to sew quite fast, but realistically, being able to go from nothing to a finished garment in an evening is not what most sewing procedure looks like. I mean, sometimes it could take days, weeks, even months to finish a garment, especially if I'm not up to it, you know what I mean? So taking our time is to also ensure that the finished garment will turn out well. If you reverse to going a bit slower and don't put a firm deadline on when you're supposed to be finished, the advantage of this is that when you go slow and sew mindfully, over time you will be able to get better and better and better. And you know what happens when you get better and better? Well, you get faster. So that's what I mean when I say go slow to be able to speed up later, because we are not working at the assembly line in a sewing factory. We are doing sewing for different reasons, and one of those is just to have a satisfactory experience and to be able to wear and be happy with the end result. And being mindful and taking your time is definitely the best ways of achieving a garment that is close or exactly to the vision that you had in your head. So again, and I'm saying this to myself, Johanna, don't stress when you're sewing. It's usually only going to lead to, well, disappointments, basically. Another important mindset that I've realized over the years, it's so important to stay curious and be open to learning new stuff. Now, just because I've sewn for 4 decades, that doesn't mean that I know it all, because wait, far from it. Honestly, in some ways I realize now that I know less than I thought maybe a decade ago or 2 decades ago, and I think it's a beautiful thing to be humble about the fact that you can always improve your skills. So definitely seek out new tutorials here on YouTube. You can check out courses. I have a couple of sewing courses if you want to learn more. Of course, tutorials on the web. Take a sewing class, chat with your sewing friends. There are so many ways of learning new things. And I also recommend, when we speak about books, is to get one of those basic sewing books. Now, the one I'm holding up right now is Reader's Digest New Complete Guide to Sewing This you can find in lots of different stores. There are lots of different editions. I have an older one that's really good. And you can get them used. Mine is used and also very used because I love having this. This is one of those good books with clear illustrations, step by step, that I think is very, very helpful. It covers a lot of things. Again, they lack a little bit when it comes to sewing with knits, but I have lots of resources both here on YouTube and in the book Fit for Knits that I mentioned previously, and lots of other books and courses that I've designed. But if you want to learn woven, definitely invest in one of these books. Again, I've linked to this book in the description section. Reader's Digest, New Complete Guide to Sewing. Get one of those and I think you will be very happy. It's a good like a reference resource. So don't underestimate good old style sewing books. I'm a huge fan. Another lesson that I clearly had to learn, even though now that I'm saying it, it sounds so obvious. But since sewing is quite a pricey hobby, it's very easy to get tempted to look for bargains. But, well, honestly, a good rule of thumb is to don't buy stuff just because they're cheap. And when I say cheap, I mean bargain bin thread, cheap sewing machines that you can find in a supermarket, fabrics that are really inexpensive and clearly even when you hold them you can feel that these are not a good material or a fiber mix, but over time you will learn to get a bit of gauge of differences between different qualities, because the thing is that we spend a lot of time making our garments. It's a lot of time, it's a lot of effort, and skimping on these things only to have your garment basically fall to pieces after a few washes and wear, for instance because you use some cheap bargain bin thread, or you use the fabric that starts pilling or lose its color. I mean, we've all had this, and sometimes it is hard to know about what stuff is good. Luckily there are actually a few brands that are known for their dedication to quality and are reliable. Yeah, they might cost a little bit more, but they're always worth it in my opinion. So I'm going to name a few names here that I would say is a pretty trustworthy brands. So for instance, for sewing machine needles, I'm a big fan of Schmetz. Their needles are really durable. They have a good range of different needles for different type of fabrics and machines. Another brand that I think is good is Organ. And when it comes to thread, I would say that Gutermann is probably my favorite brand. Coats also make good threads. When it comes to scissors, I'm a big fan of Kai Scissor. It's a Japanese brand that has really, really good scissor. Fiskars is another brand that I think is good. Now, of course, I'm just mentioning a couple that I have personal experience with. I know there are more brands, so if you have any suggestions on reliable brands for notions and things like that, definitely tell us in the comment section, because it's not easy. It's a jungle out there, especially if you're new. You might think that, oh, but thread and thread, it's the same thing, right? Well, unfortunately it's not, because you don't want cheap thread that breaks when you just pull it a tiny bit like that. And if you find thread in the bargain bins, they do have a tendency of being very easy to pull apart and break, and you don't want that in your beautiful garment. And one thing that definitely comes with a high price tag is good quality sewing machines. I feel your pain. I mean, they do cost a lot. Now, so I totally understand why it might be tempting to get a cheap sewing machine from a bargain store or a supermarket. They do have sometimes offers. I mean, obviously, if you only thing you do is maybe hem a couple of pants a year, then, well, you could do a cheap machine. But I guess if you're watching sewing videos on YouTube, you probably are a bit more ambitious than that with your sewing right now. If you aren't able to afford those good quality sewing machines because they are really expensive, I definitely recommend that you check out the second-hand route. So for instance, the sewing machine that I have is a Bernina from the late 80s. In fact, I've never owned a new regular sewing machine. So I bought vintage sewing machines for mostly Viking, Husqvarna and Bernina, and those have been really, really good purchases. So this one works like a charm. It's obviously over 30 years, almost 40 years now. So you don't always have to buy a new thing. So if you had a limited amount of money, I would definitely invest in a serviced, well-functioning, older sewing machine over a new but not well-made sewing machine. Yeah, it's a bummer that they're so expensive. I hear you. I mean, let's be real. You don't sew to save money. There are other reasons why most of us sew. So I guess we have to treat it like that as well. I mean, gone are the days where you would be able to save money on sewing. I mean, the only, I would say, reasonable way that you can save money on sewing is if you invest in really good quality fabric, maybe designer left off, and as I said, good thread, good notions, and make really long lasting, well-made clothes, because they will be less expensive than if you bought it in a designer store. But you cannot compete with those high street chains such as H&M and Target or Walmart or Mango, stuff like that. I mean, it is what it is. We are doing it for different reasons for sure. So unfortunately, it's quite a costly hobby. There's no way around it. Now the final lesson is definitely a mindset lesson, and that is to be kind to yourself, because we don't know what we don't know, and it's so easy to compare yourself with other, especially now that we have access to all these other sewists online that seems to crank out garments that looks perfect, and they seem to do it so effortlessly and quick. Well, and I am one of those people in a way, because I do put out a lot of content regarding sewing. I like to show off what I've been doing. So I definitely realize that I am probably one of those people that are contributing to this feeling. So I definitely want to say that I'm aware of it, but still you have to understand that we all have our own unique abilities and challenges, skill set, and of course experience, and all these things will influence the end result. So you have to be humble in that way and understand that we all work with what we got. So if you don't feel that your sewing skills or your speed or whatever is up to par with anyone else, well, it's not a sewing competition. The most